A couple of months ago, I was invited to participate in a Christian leadership summit in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I've been to a lot of different countries, but I had never been to South America, so there was no way I was going to pass up this opportunity. I love learning new languages, so one of the things I was really looking forward to was learning some of the native language, which is Portuguese. Before I could go, though, I had to get a new passport. I had one when I went to Greece back in 2012, but it had expired. Pro tip, do not try to get your passport renewed through the post office, at least not if you live in a big city like Las Vegas. I made an appointment at the passport office at a local university, and it was the shortest appointment I've ever had. Anyway, I digress. After my short 19-hour plane trip from Las Vegas to Brazil, I was picked up at the airport by my good friend Leandro. He's the regional chapters director for Brazil. It was a bit of a drive from the airport to downtown Sao Paulo. I got this pic of a favela pretty close to the airport. It's what we here in the US might call a shanty town. We had a bit of a wait before our hotel room would be ready, so we decided to check out this massive church, which is a replica of Solomon's Temple. Outside, there was a big sculpture of a menorah and a replica of the tabernacle. It did get kind of culty when we went inside because they required our phones to be confiscated before entering. There were thousands of people in the auditorium, and the preacher looked like a tiny speck from where we were at the back. Speaking of culty, the church had pretty much every hallmark of a prosperity gospel church. Enormous amounts of money spent on extravagant facilities and production, pastors that clearly live like kings, and weekly lectures titled Prosperity with God. Anyway, it was a very interesting stop. Driving around town, I was really drawn by the mix of old and new architecture. It's like there's something about downtown Sao Paulo that wants to be modern and cosmopolitan, but also doesn't want to abandon the past. One can expect to see homelessness in pretty much every big city, but this really was on a completely different level. Sao Paulo is the fourth largest city in the world with 21.6 million people. And it seemed like there were homeless people filling every major street median and underpass. According to Leandro, drug addiction is a major contributor. I mean, I did witness a homeless guy using a needle on a sidewalk in broad daylight. In fact, I invite you to pause the video for a second and just say a quick prayer for these folks. We finally checked into our hotel room and got some much-needed rest. I don't usually sleep well in hotels, but for whatever reason, I got great sleep while I was there. The next day, we grabbed some hotel breakfast and hopped over to another hotel where the summit would be held. And it promised to be a full day with the schedule packed from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The summit itself was organized and hosted by Apologetics on Mission. My company did some social media work for them a few months ago, and I've been really impressed with their ministry, so definitely go follow their social media pages if you haven't already. In attendance at the summit were a small group of hand-picked leaders selected for their influential ministries and their potential for fruitful ministry networking. There were directors of apologetics ministries, pastors, university representatives, and even this one guy who was a Brazilian lawyer slash YouTuber slash pastor. Things kicked off with a presentation by the hosts, Apologetics on Mission. They really have a fantastic ministry, which is aimed at training future leaders in Christian apologetics, particularly in places like Africa and South America. And their presentation really painted a sweeping vision for apologetics in a global context. They also cited a really shocking statistic that I just can't stop thinking about. According to recent reports, there are about 10,000 new Christian converts in Brazil every single day. And that's exciting for us in the apologetics community because it means there's a huge opportunity for deep discipleship. And an integral part of discipleship is training people on the rational justifications for the truths of the Christian faith. Next up after Apologetics on Mission was this guy named Tassos Licurgo, the Brazilian lawyer slash YouTuber slash pastor that I mentioned. He's kind of like Frank Turek and Ben Shapiro all rolled into one. He's a really quick-witted and sharp speaker who's passionate about philosophy, theology, apologetics, and politics. He gave a brief but absolutely fire talk on how anti-Christian socialism is rapidly infiltrating universities and churches in Brazil, and how the time may be ripe for some high-profile debates with prominent non-Christians, which is very much like what I'm familiar with working at Reasonable Faith with Dr. William Lane Craig. After Tassos presented, Leandro and I, we were representing the Reasonable Faith ministry. We shared how we are training up apologetics leaders by certifying chapter directors to open Reasonable Faith chapters across the world. Currently, there are 250 chapters in 39 countries on 6 continents, and we have 8 chapters in Brazil. And Leandro reported that about 120 more people have expressed interest in starting new chapters there. So even if only a quarter of those go on to complete the certification process, Brazil will actually have the second most chapters in the world after the US. By the way, most of the talks at the summit were given in English, but I included a couple sentences in Portuguese in my talk, which the Brazilians seem to enjoy. After us, a Brazilian pastor described how most Brazilian churchgoers simply lack a familiarity with apologetics, but they're really eager to learn more once they're introduced. And this has been my own experience here in the US. I kind of think it's similar to the way Steve Jobs approached tech design. He would say that many people don't know what they want until you actually show it to them. My good friend and client Bill Scott gave a talk representing Ratio Christi International, which is it's a ministry that focuses on campus apologetics. And he noted the ministry's efforts recently in Africa, as well as future plans for India, Singapore, and Malaysia, as well as other countries. Our missions between Ratio Christi International and Reasonable Faith are actually really close aligned, and Bill and I have talked about how we can collaborate more in the future, so that's really exciting. Finally, my friend Saulo, he's also a Reasonable Faith chapter director. He gave a talk representing the chaplain program at Mackenzie Presbyterian University in Sao Paulo. He really stressed the need for more Christians in Brazil with academic credentials. So as in the US, it's the unfortunate reality in Brazil that many very intelligent people aren't taken seriously because they simply don't have a piece of paper or letters next to their name. University professors and researchers, they really have a disproportionately large cultural influence because they're the ones that teach the thought leaders of the future. This is exactly what my boss, Dr. William Lane Craig, has been saying for years here in the US. In fact, in a talk for this group called Grad Resources, Dr. Craig said the following: Christian academics, especially those who teach at secular universities, are the church's front line in this battle. This is a front which is absolutely crucial for the advance of the kingdom of God in our age. Why? Well, simply because the university is the single most important structure shaping Western culture. It is at the university that our future political leaders, our journalists, our lawyers, our teachers, our business executives will be trained. It is at the university that they will formulate and more likely absorb the worldview that will shape their lives. And since these are the opinion makers that will shape our culture, the worldview that they imbibe at the university will be the one that shapes culture. If we can change the university, then we can change our culture through those who shape culture. If the Christian worldview can be restored to a place of prominence and respect at the university, then it will have a leavening effect throughout society. After all of the talks at the summit, our hosts facilitated some group exercises and discussions where we explored what we thought were some of the biggest apologetics-related questions and obstacles being faced today, as well as possible solutions and resources. We ended the day with a prayer for the Lord to bless our work in spreading the gospel in Brazil and raising up leaders in apologetics there. Then we all went to an excellent local restaurant where we enjoyed some great food and even greater conversation. Of course, I couldn't leave Brazil without some souvenirs for the family, so after dinner, I hit up a shopping mall where I picked up some really cool gifts for my wife and kids. Overall, it was an unforgettable trip, and one that I think will bring about a lot of positive impact for Christianity in Brazil in the years and decades to come. Thanks for watching, and if you like hearing about the Lord's work around the world, please like and subscribe.